Posso? Então, okay. Na apresentação. I will now make a short presentation of Professor Paldiel. He was born in Antwerp, Belgium in 1937, and his family is Jewish, fled to France, and did get a visa from Aristides Sousa Mendes, but they were not able to get it, to use it. By that time, it was too late to use the visa, so they fled to Switzerland, where the family also had the help of another righteous Gentile, a Catholic priest. And then they eventually made it to the United States, where he studied at Temple University, economics, like me. And other important studies, and then what he did also was get MA and PhD in Holocaust studies. And from 1982 to 2007, he headed the Department of the Righteous Among Nations at Yad Vashem, the Israeli Authority for Remembrance. So he has been greatly involved with the starting Sousa Mendes and all the other rescuers who have been recognized as righteous since then. He has written many books and articles, and gives talks and speeches and lectures. And most importantly today, he is also a member of the board of directors of the Sousa Mendes Foundation, and one of the great supporters of our efforts to promote and to recognize Aristides Sousa Mendes. Professor Paldiel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And on my next appearance, I will invite you to introduce me the same way. My lecture will be in English. My native tongue was French, but I am better now in English. But since most of my life I lived in Israel, I can also speak to you, but if not, we'll do it in English. So I want to speak to you about Yad Vashem, where I spent 24 years of my life as head of the Department of the Righteous Among the Nations. Yad Vashem was created in 1953 by law, by the Israeli Parliament, to commemorate the Holocaust, to study the Holocaust, to research the Holocaust, to help tribunals with documents on the Holocaust, like the Eichmann trial in 1960-61. But in the law of Yad, one provision which said that Yad Vashem also has to deal with Hasidei Umat Olam, and Hebrew, the righteous among the nations, who risked their life to save Jews. That's in the law of Yad Vashem. That was in 1953. By the time Yad Vashem was ready to implement that provision in the law, 9 years had passed. So in 1962, after the Eichmann trial was over, Yad Vashem decided to implement that law of the righteous. So they invited a group of righteous persons to come to Israel from different parts of Europe, on the document that Yad Vashem had already assembled, that they saved Jews. And one of them was Oskar Schindler from Germany. So there was a great debate in Israel. Oskar Schindler saved over 1,000 Jews, but he was a Nazi. He was a member of the Nazi party. So many people said, well, that's not the way to start the program, by having a man like this plant a tree at Yad Vashem. Others said, yes, but he saved 1,200 Jews. So there was a public debate. And so Yad Vashem decided, no more public debates. We will create a special commission, which will act as a jury, not Yad Vashem commission, a special commission of historians, survivors, and that commission will have a president or chairman, a judge from the Supreme Court. And they will establish the criteria. Who is to be declared a righteous? That's how the commission was born in 1962. The commission began to act in 1963. So these are the following criteria, which are still being followed to this day. One is risk. Well, that is already in the law, who risk their life. In other words, people helped Jews in various ways, and they knew that if it was discovered, they could pay with their life or their freedom. Because as unthinkable as it is, the Germans decreed and made public that anyone who helps a Jew avoid detention could pay with his life if captured, if discovered. Helping a Jew to survive was a capital offense. Can you believe that in the 20th century, by a civilized country like Germany? And these were made known publicly, so everyone should know. So you didn't have to go to a lawyer to find out what the law is. On billboards and bulletin boards, you could see that. Helping a Jew is punishable by death. So that's anyone who still helped a Jew. So that's the basic criteria, risk. Number two is that the person who helped did not do it because he was expecting a substantial reward. If somebody came to me and said, I'm ready to help you, but it's going to cost you $500,000. I want to be rewarded, like a border smuggler. Border smugglers are rewarded. They're risking their life. That disqualifies. But if a person helped a Jew and hid him in his home, and that person asked the person that was hidden to also participate in the additional costs of feeding a person. Let's say a poor person hides a Jew, and he says, I have to buy more food, I have to help you with more clothes, maybe you also had to participate. That is fine. There were cases where persons hid Jewish children and they said, on one condition, that child is mine, I will save him, but you'll never have it back because I want the child. So that disqualifies, if that was the condition. Okay, so, and there are other types of rewards. There are persons who hid women and they took advantage of the women for sexual favors. There are such cases. So that's number two. No precondition in the terms which can be interpreted as a reward. Okay. Number three, verification. How do you establish a story? When a person was hiding a Jew, he didn't go to the municipality here and filled out a form and said, I am hiding a Jew, that's my name. It's secret. It had to be kept secret. So how do you verify a story? The persons have to come forward. Both sides. One person who says, I hid a Jew and I want to be honored. Hashem says, fine, good. Where is that Jew? Let him come forward and certify, acknowledge, verify. Now, if that rescuer said, I don't know where he is, he went to Australia, I don't know where. Well, we say we have to wait because we don't know. There were cases of people who wanted to be honored for Yad Vashem for other motivations, for political motivations. They wanted to say, let's see, I saved Jews and Yad Vashem honored me and I want to be elected for some office. So it has to be certified by both sides and principally by the beneficiary, the one who received the aid. Now, if the beneficiary is no longer alive, he died, well, maybe there was an exchange of letters after the war between the beneficiary and the rescuer. And from the exchange of letters, we can see that they know each other because one helped the other. That's good. Or in some cases, the Germans, when they caught somebody helping a Jew, they put him on trial. And we have the records of this trial of the investigation by the Gestapo. Beautifully typed on quarto paper, double space, in which they tell the whole, because the Germans were very proud. Oh, we caught another rescuer, and we have to document that for history. And so, although the Jewish person was shot, and maybe the rescuer was sent to a concentration camp or what, he was killed. If we have the record from the Gestapo, that too, it can serve as verification. In other words, the story has to be verified. And another criteria is we don't recognize people who may have saved a Jew or two or three, but they collaborated with the enemy, collaborated. So what is collaboration? So there are all kinds of things. Let's say a person was an anti-Semite. He hated Jews, but he saved some Jews. Now, this is not something theoretical. We have such cases where persons were known that they didn't like Jews. They didn't like, but they saved. So that's okay, as long as he didn't harm. He did not harm. He was not in the SS, he was not in the Gestapo, and he didn't harm either a Jew or other persons. If he harmed another person, okay, we had a case where a German civilian saved Jews in Belarus, and what today is Belarus. But after the war, he was short of money. He went and he robbed the bank, and the banker didn't want to turn over the money. He shot him. And then the people that he saved came to Yad Vashem and say, honor him. And we say he killed a person. And they said, well, he needed the money, the mortgage and this and that. Well, we say we cannot honor a person who killed another person, although he risked his life to save a Jew. So that disqualifies, okay? But a person who is not a saint, he doesn't like Jews, but he saved Jews and didn't harm anyone, that's okay. Collaboration. And finally, Yad Vashem, it's only of a non-Jews saving Jews. The person who saved is a non-Jew, and the person that he saved is a Jew. So the question is, who is a Jew? If you ask 5 Jews, how do you identify yourself as a Jew? You ask 5 Jews, you get 10 answers. Someone says religion, someone says culture, someone says this, someone says was born. But as long as the person considered himself Jewish, then it's okay. But what if the person, before Hitler came to power, converted? He became a Christian and he really stepped out. He doesn't want anything to do with the Jewish people, the Jewish religion. Okay, everyone is entitled, you know. And a Christian saved him, a non-Jew saved him. But to the Nazis, he was still a Jew. Because according to the Nuremberg laws, anyone who has Jewish grandparents, 3 is a Jew. They didn't care whether you were a Christian or Muslim or Buddhist. So there was a debate. Do we go according to the Nuremberg laws? Or do we go to if a person considers himself Jewish? Why is this a debate? Because if a non-Jew helped a converted Jew, maybe he helped him because that converted Jew was part of his own community. But he was not a Jew. So the rescuer's motivation may have been different here. But anyway, so these are the basic criteria for honoring. So the question arises, what about diplomats? Diplomats did not risk their life. The worst that can happen to a diplomat, persona non grata, he's told to leave. He's expelled, but he's not killed. So how do we honor diplomats? So the commission decided when it comes to diplomat, there are 2 criteria. The first one is he disobeyed orders by his own government, or he fooled around with the orders in such a way that he acted against the spirit of the order. He did not obey them. He did not function according to the mandate to which he was appointed. That's number 1. And number 2, he helped many Jews, not just one. Because for persons who are not diplomats, it is sufficient that he helped one Jew. to be honored by Yad Vashem. Just one, even one. There were those who helped 10, 20, 30, 100, like Schindler. But when it comes to diplomats, we ask that the number should be more than one, more than two, more than three. How many, we haven't established, but we're looking for more than numbers. So in those cases, we have honored over 30 diplomats who acted in different ways. How did persons save Jews other than diplomats? The most common way of helping a Jew is to hide him, sheltering him. So the Jew had to disappear. Starting in 1942, the Germans had decreed the final solution by extermination. So if a Jew wanted to save himself, he had to be here and not to be. He had to exist and not to be or not to be. Famous Shakespearean statement. So he had to disappear. So where can he disappear? Somebody had to hide him and feed him and take care of him. And those persons were sheltered, and there were people, you won't believe it, there were people who were in hiding for 2 years, 2.5 years. It could be a hiding for 1 week, month, and even years. People were hiding in places where no one could imagine that there was a human being hiding. For instance, let's take this table. If here, then you can have 2 people inside here. There were people hiding inside under the table, which was closed off in homes and so on. No one would suspect that there was a person there. Okay, I will tell you something more. There were people who were hiding inside cemeteries in the tomb. The person who was responsible for the cemetery removed the body and put it someplace else, expanded the hall, and he was hiding 1 or 2 or 3 Jews, and put back the tombstone on top of it. Would anyone suspect that there was a living person hiding inside of a tomb? And even if you would suspect, where do you know? Which tomb? You're going to a cemetery, where? So it has to be in most of the hiding places were inside homes, in the attic, in the basement, in the barn, in the pigsty. The best place is in a barn where there are animals, and you dig a bunker under the animals, and people are hiding. Why? Because where you have pigs and animals, the smell is terrible. So if the police come to look, they're not going to stay too long. They want to get away. Okay, let's leave. That's a good place to hide. So we have thousands and thousands of Jews. I'm saying thousands. I'm not saying millions, of course, but thousands of Jews who were hidden in the most unimaginable places. Various periods of time. So that's the most common form of help. The second type of help is providing Jews with documents, false documents. And in those times, everybody had to have what the Germans called the Kennkarte, which is an ID. And you had to have a baptismal certificate, have a work certificate. So if you stopped on the street, ID, where do you work? Show me where you work. You have a card? Good. If you don't, come to the police station, we'll investigate. Now, there were many Jews who were passing as non-Jews. Okay? Like there were many Jews who looked in the mirror and said, oh, I don't look like a Jew. Blonde hair, light skin. And I talk like a regular person. And if you live in Poland and you want to pass as a non-Jew, you have to know the Christian religion, the Catholic religion, because you have to know how to cross yourself. You have to know how to greet a priest or a nun. You have to go to church and take the bread, the holy bread, into your mouth. I'm saying this because there's a case of one woman, then she lived in New Jersey, she said. She went to church and, waiting in line to take the holy bread, the priest came up. Everybody opened their mouth, he put the holy bread. And she came up, she said to him, I'll take it, I'll put it myself. And everybody looked, that can't be a Catholic. And she realized she made a terrible mistake that could have been fatal, but she managed to escape. So you have to know enough about the religion, the customs. You have to speak the local language, but not too well. If you are passing as someone who comes from a village and you speak the language, the English of Oxford University, it doesn't fit in. So you have, but there were many people who passed as non-Jews, but they needed documents, they needed IDs, and there were people who helped them with forging IDs. And the Germans were very, very upset with forging IDs because that, you know, the German mentality, the documents have to be, and those people could also lose their life. That's the second type. The third form of help was helping Jews to escape, to cross borders, from France to Switzerland, or to cross from Denmark to Sweden, from Greece to Turkey, from France to Spain or Portugal, to get away from where the Germans are in control and the German collaborators. Young people who wanted to, they were in Poland or in Russia to help them to get to a place where there are partisans, the partisans in the forest, so they could fight. They have to be young and so forth. So there were many people who escaped and they needed help because a Jew was not allowed to take the bus, the train, because in those days, when you took the train or the bus, you had to show your ID. And usually Jews had an ID with a big J, Jude. In France, Juif. In Holland, Jood. So you can't go and say, give me a ticket for the train and you show your ID. Immediately you get arrested. So you have to have a person that will take you to the border. You can't do it alone. So there were many persons who helped Jews to escape. And finally, the fourth category is children. If you were married and had small children and you wanted to hide, are you going to hide with your children in a hiding place? He's going to make noise. He's going to cry. He's going to say, Mama, I'm hungry. You have to keep silent. Or if you want to change your identity, the child will call you by your previous name. Changing your identity meant also pray. If your name is Moshe Cohen, you have to have a different type of name. Even though you look like an Aryan, like a German Aryan, but if you go with the Moshe Cohen, it's not going to help you very much. So a child will call you by your previous name. So you cannot have your children, or if you want to escape, you cannot. So parents had to make the most difficult decision in their life, to separate from their children, give them away so the children will survive and you will have a chance to go and try to survive yourself, the parent. So to whom do you give your children? In some cases, you know, some people, friends, children, they're willing to take one of your children. When they take their children, they have to give them a new name, they have to train them. It's very complicated. In many cases, there were secret organizations who took the child from you, but they told you, we're not going to tell you where we're giving the child. We're going to give him to a certain family, but we're not going to tell you where and how. You're not going to have contact with your child. Why? Because let's say you are captured. The Gestapo arrests you and say, excuse me, according to our record, you have 2 children. Where are they? Oh, you don't want to talk? Okay, we'll interrogate you. We have methods. So if you know where they are under torture, you may give away the place where your child is, and you will endanger that family is keeping the child. So it's better that you don't know, even under torture. So there were people who helped Jewish parents to arrange hiding places for their children. I'm not talking about isolated cases. I'm talking about thousands of cases. Thousands, literally. In France, between 4,000 to 6,000 cases, family, and some of them didn't even know they were Jewish because they were raised in the tradition of those families. Okay, so these are the 4 categories of help. Now, when we come to diplomats, it's a little bit different. How did diplomats help? Several ways. By, first of all, giving them false documents. Or not false documents, let's say passports. What kind of passports? I'll give you a few examples. There was a diplomat from El Salvador. His name was Jose Castellanos, and he gave out thousands of citizenship papers to Jews, making them citizens of El Salvador. Now, those Jews who received the citizenship papers, they never heard the name El Salvador. They didn't know one word of Spanish. But if they have a document of El Salvador, the Germans said El Salvador is not at war with us. So giving these documents. Per Anger and Danielsson, the Swedish ambassador in Budapest, gave what is called passport, provisional Swedish passport, based on fake information. What sort of fake information? The passport stated that this person holding the passport and his real name, real photo, is on the way to go to Sweden because he has relatives in Sweden or he has business in Sweden. So we are asking the authorities not to harm him. Signed by the Swedish ambassador in Budapest, which is false. I mean, the person is right, but he doesn't have any relatives in Sweden and he doesn't have any business. So why would the Germans and the Hungarian fascists honor him, honor such a person? Because Sweden had relations with Germany and they were doing business with Germany. They were producing ball bearings, which the Germans needed for the war effort. So if you had a Swedish document like this, you don't go on the train, you don't go to deportation. So passports, that's one way that diplomats could help. There was an honorary diplomat in France who represented the country of Liberia. Liberia is an African country. Liberia in 1940-42 was the only independent country in Africa. But it's made out of black people only. But they had an ambassador in Paris. So he gave out passports to Jewish people who were white, but they were Liberian citizens. So he couldn't give too many that would place him under suspicion. But if you had a Liberian passport, you were also safe. So diplomats could give documents like this, but not only passport, they could also help you. There were diplomats who helped Jews to escape. There was a diplomat from Switzerland. His name is Ernst Prodolier, and he was a consul in Bregenz. Bregenz is on Austria, on the Austrian side of the border with Switzerland. And people who wanted to cross into Switzerland, this diplomat not only how to cross the border and not get caught, but he even went with them. And he crossed the border with them into Switzerland, and then he went back and he said, it's okay. So there were diplomats who helped Jews to escape. Well, you have all heard about the German diplomat, Georg Ferdinand Duckwitz in Denmark. And he is the one that made possible for 8,000 Jews to escape to Switzerland. I won't go into the whole story. He was a German official who worked as a diplomat in Denmark. Denmark was occupied by Germany, but they allowed the Danish government to function. That's the only country that the Germans occupied, and they allowed the government to function. Because they wanted to show, you see, a German occupation is not such a bad thing. We allowed the government to function, but only in Denmark. They did it for various reasons, agricultural reasons, so we're not going to go into that. And he was a commercial attaché. When he learned in 1943 that the SS commander inside Denmark had sent a message to Hitler asking permission to round up the 8,000 Jews, Then he tried to stop the message from reaching Hitler, but he was told that it already came on the Führer's desk and he had approved it. So he flew to Sweden, to Stockholm, and he asked the Swedish government, if the Jews from Denmark come to Sweden, will you allow them to land? Sweden was not at war. And the distance between Denmark, that part of Denmark, like Copenhagen, and Sweden is very narrow. They call it the Oversound. On the clear day, you can even see on the other side. And the Swedish government said, yes, we will allow them to land. So he went back to Denmark and he got in touch with the Danish underground. And he said, you have to take the Jews from Denmark over into Sweden. The Swedes will allow them to land. But you have only about 2 weeks to do it. So he spilled the news that Dukwitz. And that's why most of the Jews in Denmark were saved, because they were all taken out. And they were in Sweden, and they remained in Sweden for a year and a half. So he helped them to escape, and he was a diplomat. Dukwitz was very interesting. Before he came to Denmark as a diplomat, he was a Nazi. He was a member of the Nazi party. But then he left the party. So I'm saying this, that to be a rescuer, you don't have to be a saint throughout your life. You can have a bad record, but you can change it. But he was simply a member of the party. He didn't harm anyone. Then he left the party. So escape. I have other examples of people who helped. I'll give you another example of people who helped by protecting Jews in a very strange way. And you're not going to believe the story, but it's a true story. There was an ambassador from Iran in France. You know, France was a defeated country, and France was divided in two, the occupied zone and the Vichy zone. And the United States even had relations with Vichy up until November 1940. And there were Jews from Iran that lived in France. And this ambassador from Iran, and the Germans still had relations with Iran. Why? Iran has oil. The Germans don't have oil. So it's good to have relations with the country. And Iran was not at war. The name of the ambassador was Abdul Hussein Sardari. And he devised a way how to save the Iranian Jews in France. They had come to France after World War I because of the condition in Iran and so on. This is how he did. Did you know that the Nazis considered the Persians as belonging to the Aryan race? Did you know that? According to their crazy ideas, the Aryans, they wandered from the Himalayas, and some of them went down into India, and they created the caste system, the Brahmins, and another tribe continued to Persia, and they created the Persian Empire. The word Iran is a changeover from the word Aryan. But anyway, the Nazis considered the Iranians to be an offshoot of the Aryans. So this ambassador said, these Jews, they're not Semites. They belong to a certain Iranian tribe, which he called Djiboutis. They are Iranians who converted to Judaism, but they are not Semites. They are Aryans. In other words, their blood is Aryan blood, but they practice the Jewish religion. So according by your own definition, you Nazis, you define the Jew by his blood, right? Not by their religious practice, but by the blood. So, but these people are not Semites. They are Aryans. They like the Jewish religion, so they practiced it. And it worked, and he saved them. Crazy. But this is a true story, what I'm telling you. The Nazis felt for that. Maybe they didn't believe it, but they felt for the sake of good relations with Iran. So we're not going to have a few thousand Jews. We're going to leave it for later on. So there were, and he was a diplomat. He had a diplomat to save Jews by using, now there was another diplomat, Sebastian Romero Radigales. He was a Spanish ambassador in Greece. And how did he save certain Jews in Greece who claimed that they are descendants of Jews who once lived in Spain? Now, how do you establish that? If I were to say I'm a descendant of people who 500 years before lived in a certain country, and someone would ask me, Mordechai, how do you prove that? And I don't have the proof. I don't have the documents from 500 years to prove a descent. It's very hard, right? If I were to ask you, prove you that, can you bring me documents? It's very hard. So what did he do, Radigales? He asked them, these people who claimed, so some of them were speaking a language called Ladino. Ladino is a language by Jews originally from Spain. It has Spanish language roots. It's called Ladino. Just like Jews from Poland and Europe speak Yiddish, which is actually a Germanic language. So they speak Ladino. So I speak Ladino. And my mother used to sing Spanish songs. My mother used to sing Spanish songs. And she used to do Spanish cooking. And Radigales said, that's enough, that's good. You are Spanish descent. So how do you save them? So I'll tell you. In 1924, Primo de Rivera, have you ever heard of that name? Primo de Rivera was a dictator in Spain. And in 1924, they passed a law that anyone who claims Spanish descent is under the protection of Spain. But he cannot come to Spain. He cannot, doesn't mean you can come to Spain, but you are under the protection wherever you live. You can go to the Spanish embassy, consulate, and you're under the protection. So Radigales said, here, I have hundreds of Jews who claim that they are Spanish descendants, and I place them under the protection of Spain. He tried to save them. But then the Nazis came and said to Radigales, that's not good enough for us. You say they are Spanish descendant, you take them to Spain. But he said, I can't take them to Spain because under the law, wherever they are, they stay there, but they are under the protection, but they cannot come to Spain. So the Nazis said, that's not good enough for us. Either you take them or we take them. So there were a negotiation between Radigales and the SS in Greece. And finally, the agreement was, we will take these 500 Jews to Bergen-Belsen camp. They will be in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, and they will be in a special section until we can figure out what to do with them. And the solution was that finally the Spanish government under Franco, this is already 1944, and Franco was already realizing who is winning the war and who is losing the war, so the good of the winners. The decision was, we will allow these people to cross Spain, not to stay, but they can come into Spain and cross and then go to Morocco, but only 50 people at a time. So each group of 50 people can cross, but the other 50 people have to wait until the first 50 have left Spain. So slowly 50 people crossed Spain and they were saved. And this is what Radigales did. So he's a diplomat. By using this very unconfirmed Spanish descent. Incidentally, I have to tell you that also the Portuguese Consul General in Budapest in 1944, right, also used this trick. I have his name here. No, Branchino. Branchino, in 1944, Branchino was given permission by who else? By Salazar. even Salazar, right, Alberto de Lis Teixeira Branquino. I wrote down, it's a long name. In 1944, when the Germans were in Hungary, even Salazar saw the handwriting on the wall, who is winning, who is losing, and he allowed Branquino to give to those Jews who claim Portuguese descent, also very difficult to establish, but various proofs. He gave them what is called protective letters, Schutzbrief. What is a Schutzbrief? A Schutzbrief is a special document that the diplomats in Budapest invented, saying that this person is, for various reasons, under the protection of my country. So it's the real name, the real photo and everything, but he's under the protection of my country. So again, these are only diplomats who were not at war with Germany. Okay, so Portugal was not at war with Germany. So Branquino was giving to several hundred Jews these, what we call in German, Schutzbrief, protective letters, protective documents, claiming that these people were under the protection of Portugal because they are descendants of Portugal and they were safe. So what Radicales did in Greece, Branquino did in Budapest. So this is Schutzbrief. I started talking about Schutzbrief, and there were many diplomats in Budapest, Raoul Wallenberg, Karl Lutz, Raoul Wallenberg from Sweden, Karl Lutz from Switzerland, and even the nuncio, the ambassador from the Vatican, Angelo Rota, R-O-T-T-A. He gave protective letters. He was a diplomat. The nuncio was a diplomat. He gave protective letters claiming that those people were on the way of becoming Catholics. You imagine a Jew with a long beard and payas and everything. He's on the way of becoming a Catholic. He's taking lessons. So he's under the protection of the Holy See, of the Vatican, not to be touched. Now, all these diplomats in Budapest, this is 1944. This is June, July, August, September 1944 in Budapest. It was very terrible for the Jews there. All these people, then the government, the fascist government, allowed all these Jews who were under the protection of Spain, of Switzerland, of Portugal, and so forth, and the Vatican, to be housed in what they called international ghetto. They set aside about 100 houses, and this was called the international ghetto. Altogether, there were like 30,000 Jews in the international ghetto in Budapest, protected by these countries, as I mentioned, Sweden, Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, and the Vatican, altogether 30,000, protected by these diplomats. Diplomats that the Hungarian fascist government wanted to have relations. Wanted to have relations with Franco, with Salazar, and these other governments. And finally, visas. Visa. If you can get a visa to any country, then you can get out because you have a visa. But the problem of visas is the following. There was an American Assistant Secretary of State, an American Assistant Secretary of State, who was responsible for passports to America. He was in Washington. His name is Breckinridge Long, L-O-N-G. And he wrote to the US consuls in Europe how not to give visas to people. And this is the message that he wrote to them in 1941. He told the consuls, and I quote, to put every obstacle in the way and to require additional evidence and to resort to various administrative devices which would postpone and postpone and postpone. This is his words, 3 times he said. Postpone the granting of visas. In other words, give excuses. What sort of excuses? let's say I want to come to America and I fulfill all the requirements. I have enough money, so I won't become a public charge. Okay? And I have friends in America, I have family. So the question is, you want to come to America? Do you have any relatives in Germany? Yes, I have a brother in Germany. Disqualified. Why? Because if you come to America, the Gestapo will hold your brother as a hostage and will require you to spy for Germany. And therefore, we don't want spies for Germany. But I'm a Jew. I'm not going to spy for Germany. Never mind. You have a brother in Germany, you can't come to America. An excuse. Okay? There were other excuses. There were people who received, they were approved for a visa to America. And the following is told as a joke. A person in Berlin is invited by the American embassy. Come in, we want to tell you good news. You have been approved to come to America as an immigrant. And the Jew comes, here's my passport, my German passport, can I get the visa? Not now. You have to come back in 2 years. Why in 2 years? There's a long line, there's a quota. There's a quota. And there's so many people ahead of you, but you have been approved. So come back in 2 years, you'll get the visa. So the joke goes, the Jew is about to leave, he goes to the door, and then he opens the door, and then he turns his back and says, excuse, can I ask you a question, Mr. Ambassador? Yeah, what's your question? When I come back in 2 years, should I come in the morning or afternoon? That's the joke. Okay. So visas were important. So I'm going to come to Sousa Mendes, of course. So, but when we talk about visas, I can give you many examples before I talk about Sousa Mendes. The Chinese ambassador in Vienna, Feng Shanghou, gave visas for people to go to China, to Shanghai. You know, it was like an international city, a certain section. You could come there, and so he gave visas to people, and there was a German Jewish community in Shanghai, people from Vienna. Okay, so he gave a visa, which served as an exit visa, because when you wanted to go to Shanghai, you didn't need a visa. It was an open city. So why did he give a visa to people to leave Germany? That's in 1939, before the war. Because to get out of Germany, you had to show that you have a destination. In order to get, it's like an exit visa. In France, they called it laissez-passer. You have to have an exit visa. If you came to the Gestapo and say, I want to leave Germany, can I have a passport? Where are you going? To Shanghai. How do I know? Maybe you're lying. Show us. The ambassador from Austria gave you a visa that you can go, the ambassador from China, Feng Shanghou. In that case, they say you have 2 weeks time to leave. You must leave in 2 weeks. Okay, so they went to China. There were thousands of Jews who passed World War II in China. When the communists took over, all the Jews left and they went to different destinations. That's Feng Shanghou. And now I want to tell you, you've heard of the Japanese ambassador, Jun Sugihara. What was, he gave Japanese transit visas. This is 1940. This is about the same time that Sousa Mendes gave Portuguese transit visas. Sousa Mendes gave it in June 1940 here, in Bordeaux, France, and Sugihara gave it in July, August 1940. In Lithuania, in Kaunas. Kaunas was then the capital of Lithuania. It was an independent country. But everybody knew that the Germans or the Russians are going to go to war. And there were thousands of Jews and they wanted to get out. But no visas. And so some of the Jewish people learned that there was an island off Venezuela, which is called Curacao. Nice little vacation island, Curacao, which belongs to Holland. And so there was a Jewish citizen from Holland that happened to be in Lithuania. And he came to the Dutch ambassador and he said, I want to go to Curacao. I want to get out of Lithuania before the war breaks out in Lithuania. The war had already broken out elsewhere. So the ambassador said, I can't give you a visa to Curacao. No visas are required in Curacao. So the Jewish person said, well, that's fine. So I'm going. Yes, there's another thing. To go to Curacao, you need the permission of the Dutch governor in Curacao. You don't need a visa. You need his permission. If you don't have his permission, no visa is going to help you. Why you need the permission of the Dutch governor? Because Curacao is right off Venezuela. And they were refining the oil of Venezuela on Curacao. So it has strategic importance. So the Jewish person said, I have an idea. Can you put on my passport the first sentence, no visa is required in Curacao, and leave out the second sentence, you need the Dutch governor permission. Just write, no visa required, and put a stamp and so on. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And then he passed on the word that there's a way to get out of Lithuania by supposedly going to Curacao. You don't need a visa. But how are you going to get to Curacao? How are you going to get physically? You can't go via France and because there's a war there. You can only go via the Soviet Union and Japan. So you went to the Soviet ambassador. Can I get the transit visa? And the Soviet ambassador, no. Because you have to go from one end of the Soviet Union to Vladivostok. And maybe you're not going to have enough money. You'll be stuck. What are you going to do? Well, I'll continue to Japan. So it's a Japanese transit visa. So they went to the Japanese ambassador and they said, can you give us a transit visa to Japan? So we can cross the Soviet, and then from Japan, we'll take a boat across the Pacific. We'll cross the Pacific, we'll cross the Panama Canal, and we'll be in Curacao. So he asked his own government, can I give them transit visas? And they said, no, don't do that. They'll get stuck in Japan. They're not going to have enough money. But he decided he was going, like Sousa Mendes, he was going to give thousands of transit visas. So the Jews who got transit visas, Japanese transit visas. In other words, you transit, you can't stay there. They were able to get Soviet transit visas, and they were able to leave. And from Japan, they went to Shanghai, they went to Philippines. Not one person arrived in Curacao. Not even one. But they got out in time before the war began. Now we come to Sousa Mendes. Sousa Mendes did the same thing. What did Sousa Mendes claim at his tribunal? That I gave visas to people not to stay in Portugal, but to go through Portugal. What are you afraid of? They have money. They just want to go to Lisbon and hope to catch a boat, which will take them across the Atlantic and go to a place where they will feel safe. They were not going to bother. They're not going to be stuck in Portugal and maybe they'll have to be supported. But I want to say something more. You know the Sousa Mendes story. But I want to say something more about the implication. Why is the Sousa Mendes story so important? Why is it so unique? He disobeyed his government. So he said, no, don't issue any visas to Jews. That's Circular 14. And the government was Salazar. Salazar was not only the prime minister, he was also the foreign minister. He was his immediate boss. And he was told, don't do it. and he disobeyed. And so that's very strange because, look, Sousa Mendes was not a communist, was not a socialist, was not a revolutionary. He belonged to the same circle of people from where Salazar himself came. You wouldn't call him today a leftist, he's more of a righteous. He wanted Portugal to become a monarchy again. He was in favor of having a king. He felt that this is best for Portugal. So he had a long diplomatic career. He was ambassador here in Zanzibar, in San Francisco, in Antwerp, in many countries. He was an ambassador, and he was about to retire. Now, you would expect a person, and he had 13 children. So you would expect a person like that to be very careful. And you work under Salazar, you don't want to upset him, right? And so Salazar says, don't issue visas. Well, I can't issue visas, I'm sorry. I mean, I would love to. And he does just the opposite, he disobeys. And he throws his career, he ruins his career, and he becomes a poor man. And he dies a poor man. And in Portugal, where he is forced to return from Bordeaux, he's avoided by everyone. He appealed, the appeal is rejected. So I want to quote to you a few things from what Sousa Mendes said and what those who were against him said. When he decided to give visas to all the Jews in Bordeaux, he said to his staff, even if I am dismissed, I can only act as a Christian, as my conscience tells me. His daughter Isabel said, Father, stop. Why take so many risks? You should think of your future and ours. Sousa Mendes says, I am impelled by a divine power. My desire is to be with God against man rather than with man against God. Two persons were sent from Lisbon to him. Salazar was thinking maybe he can force Mendes to change his mind as he was giving out visas in Bordeaux and in Bayonne and other places. And these two persons said, orders must be obeyed. What's the matter with you? And he said, not if those orders are incompatible with any human feeling. Pereira, the Portuguese ambassador in Spain, went to see Mendes and he reported, Sousa Mendes has stepped out of his mind. He has taken leave of his senses. He's become crazy. And Sousa Mendes replied to that, you accuse me of strange behavior? Yes, it is strange behavior. However, it should be noted that everything is very strange in those days. Everything is strange. So what I was doing, I was not disobeying. I was obeying, he said. I have acted according to my conscience. I was obeying reasons of humanity that distinguish neither race nor nationality. I'm not disobeying, I am obeying. That's his defense. At his trial, by the Foreign Office, they put up a court that tried him in Lisbon. One of the witnesses said of him, his lack of sense, his lack of judgment, his failure to grasp his responsibilities of public service, and his very raison d'etre as a functionary. He shows neither repentance nor the intention to mend it. He doesn't regret what he did, even now. Because if he had said, I am sorry, I regret. His appeal was turned down on the grounds a civil servant is not competent to question orders which he must obey. So with this, my final observation is, well, we all know that society is based, in many ways, on the rule of the law. Even if you don't like the law, you obey the law. Because if everybody was going to interpret the law his way, the whole society would collapse, would break down. But even if you don't like the law, you obey it, especially if you are a public servant. If you are just a private person, okay, but if you are a public servant and you represent the country, if you are a diplomat, you represent that country and the country's law. Are you allowed to take the law into your own hands and say, that law of my country, I don't agree with that, I will not carry it out? Do you have the right to do that? Sousa Mendes says, in normal circumstances, no. But here, where I think I can save the lives of thousands of people by giving them a transit visa, where they will cross Portugal and go on their way and save life, that is something I cannot say no to that. I am also a human being. I have a conscience. They are universal laws, universal principles, above and beyond the laws of Portugal. So, in 1946, when the top Nazis were placed on trial in Nuremberg, and they all said, what do you want from me? I obeyed orders. The Führer gave an order, and he was the top lawmaker in Germany. I had to obey orders. That was not accepted. The excuse that I have to obey orders because that's the order, that's the law, that was no longer accepted, even by the Nuremberg court. There is a red line as a public servant. And the first one who gave this example was Aristides and Sousa Mendes. So that places public servants in a difficult position. Sometimes they are challenged when they are faced with your law, which is clearly anti-humanitarian. They have to find a way not to comply with the law, as Sousa Mendes did. So this case is very unique, because the other diplomats, like I mentioned, Radicales, he invented, he made people of Spain, and so he protected them, okay? And he had the permission of his government to do that. He was faking this thing about Spanish descent, okay, but he didn't say no to Franco, Radicales. So we still honor them because he saved lives. But so the Sousa Mendes story is unique. As I said, he disobeyed, but he claimed I obeyed. He disobeyed Salazar, but he obeyed moral and universal principles of humanity. So this places now a challenge to all other public servants that they cannot give the excuse, I have to obey the law, although the law is against universal principles of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mordecai Paldiel. We're very fortunate to hear this series of stories, each one more important and more impressive than the other. And of course, to know that the unique and most impressive of all is the story of the action of rescue by Aristides Sousa Mendes. So that's why we created the foundation, a hero, but he's a world hero. We have a few minutes, perhaps if somebody has a comment or a question, who would like to say something? Yes, Professor Waldron.
I'm going to speak in English. My English is not good enough, but it's only a small question and a provocative one, because I think can you hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. So why did you, the question is, why did you say that Ladino is descent of Spanish, because the Ladino is also the descendant of Portuguese, I think.
Oh,
Because the Portuguese, the Catalans, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, it just became an integrated country. Until then, there were three or four countries where today is Spain. In Portugal still remain outside. So the Jews in Iberian Peninsula spoke Portuguese, Catalan, Spanish, and even Basque. So when they went abroad, they used those kinds of language to build Ladino, but not only Spanish. That is also a consequence because Spain took care of their memory connected with the Jewish, because they say the Spanish Jews are also integrated in Hispanidad. That's why they are protected by Spain. They are from Spanish culture. They are not Spanish because they are Jews, but they knew Spanish culture, and the Portuguese did took care of that so well. So, but the Ladinos also, when I was in the undership for a small course, some of those people who survived the Holocaust and talked to the teachers that were there, one of them went from Greece to Auschwitz and survived in Auschwitz and came and lived in Israel, and he spoke to us during 3 hours, and he spoke Ladino, and we understand everything he said, and when we spoke Portuguese to him, you would understand everything.
he did understand.
Yes, because his Ladino was much similar to Portuguese than to Spanish.
I stand corrected. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
We are in the Faculty of Letters, Faculdade de Letras, so language is the house business. So
Any other comments, questions, or remarks?
May I ask one? Just a curiosity. If you can choose a story of a woman that has to also Jews, any woman that a good story of a woman that helped Jews, a woman righteous.
Oh,
Only
yes, we have many, but I was talking of diplomats.
I know.
In those days, we didn't have too many women diplomats.
Yes.
Diplomats was considered a career of men, but among the non-diplomats, there was a certain theory that women are more compassionate, they understand suffering much better. More men use mostly their mind, and the women use their feelings to a greater extent than men. And so we have, of the thousands and thousands of people that we honored, at least half of them are women. Yes, but it's not among the diplomats, because there were no women diplomats in those days. Maybe there were a few, but all the stories of the diplomats are of men. Yes.
what about Irena, the Polish,
Irena Sendler was not a diplomat, but she is an outstanding story, of course. She's a great hero. Oh, sure.
Into nurseries, into hospitals, in the ghettos of Warsaw. Now
She-
I'm remembering Princess Alice of Coimbra, married to a Greek prince. She was in Athens during World War II, and I absolutely adore her story because she, a woman, she had a congenital deafness, so she couldn't really hear very well, but she could read lips very well. So she was the main family of Germany, one of the many royal families of Germany. So she could very well speak German. And when the German army came to Greece, they spoke to her in German. And she said, "What? I can't really hear." But she had the Cohen family hidden in her house. Of course, the English royal family afterwards rescued her, but she did help the Jews in her own home and in the convent that she helped to form. And I just wanted to thank you.
We have many beautiful stories of women, but they were not diplomats like Helena Sendler, but very courageous woman. I knew Irena Sendler myself.
Oh,
I knew because when I was at Yad Vashem, she had a problem. She needed some medicine and she couldn't get the medicine in Poland. So I arranged for medicine to be sent to her in Poland. I arranged it through the Joint Distribution Committee. So, and later on when I visited Poland in 1988, I went to Poland and she was still alive and I dropped over to her home and she invited me for a cup of coffee and cookies. She was already an old, she was an old woman, but she spoke a good English. She was, you know, she was very well educated. Warsaw University, law, social work. She wasn't educated. You could have a very beautiful conversation with her. But she was an outstanding person. Outstanding.
I have perhaps one final question unless someone else has a question.
May I?
Yes.
Doctor, in relation to yourself in this contest of the Holocaust, how would you describe your upbringing in Belgium, or if you were raised in Belgium, I think, for a certain amount of time. So how would you describe your upbringing in Belgium during those days?
Well, I was born in 1937. When the Germans invaded Belgium, I was 3 years old. So we escaped to France, like many others, thousands of refugees. And in France, we moved from one place to another. Saint-Gaudens, Toulouse, Marseille. And then when the Germans, and Marseille was in the Vichy zone. So somehow we managed. But then the Germans came into Vichy in November 1942. So we had to move and we were lucky. We crossed to Grenoble, which was the Italian zone. And the Italians, they were good fascists, but they didn't harm the Jews, but they were honest fascists. I simply have to tell you, we honored a man, Giorgio Perlasca. He was an Italian, he was in Budapest, Giorgio, and he worked for the Spanish, and he saved many Jews. When he came to Israel, to be honored with a tree, he said, I have to tell you something. I'm still a fascist. And we were shocked, but he said, wait, I'm a fascist of Mussolini before he became an ally of Hitler. That was a mistake. Italian fascism was not such a bad idea in the original period. The trains were running on time. People, you know, that's the big thing. The trains were running on time, and the Mussolini, many marshlands he cultivated. People had jobs. It was a good time. And fascism was not such a bad idea. But later on, when he allied himself with Hitler, that was bad. And I mean, so, but still today, I think it could have worked, fascism. So anyway, in the Italian zone, we were not bothered. But then Italy surrendered to the Allies and the Germans came in and we had to flee. And somebody told my mother to go see a certain priest who was helping people to cross into Switzerland. And my mother went and he helped and we crossed into Switzerland. When I worked at Yad Vashem, I tried to find a priest. That was 40 years had passed, and I was helped by some people, and I found him, and we honored him. And I had a ceremony for him, and I planted a tree for him because he helped us to cross into Switzerland. And since you asked that question, I want to show you something here. Wait.
Is it there?
No, it should be. But I have a photo of me and that priest. Oh, I closed my phone before. So now I have to open it. And so I honored, yeah, it's coming back. So I'll show you. And we stayed in Switzerland. And at the end of the war, we went back to Belgium. And then I came to America, and then I went to Israel. I studied in Israel. I met my wife, we're married, I have children. So what I want to show you now is, okay, here we are. Baba. A nice photo of me and Abbé Shimon Gallet from 1990. Wait a second. No, it's here.
There's this time of escaping to, well,
This is me and him. I went to see him in Annecy. He was then retired in 1990.
The same.
You see? Oh.
there's a, here, so we can take a picture.
You see, I was once a good-looking person.
Like this, like this. Wait, stop.
A bit higher.
Only 30
No?
seconds.
Thank you.
A little bit to the right.
Yeah, stop.
Thank you.
I just wanted to
So if you
recall,
go to Yad Vashem and you say, I want to see the tree of Simon Gallet, they will show you where the tree is that I planted when I was at Yad Vashem.
and you also planted the tree for Sousa Mendes.
And the tree for the Sousa Mendes tree I planted because I was upset. I said, there's so many trees at Yad Vashem and there's no tree for Sousa Mendes. And I was told, we have to wait someone from the family to come and plant a tree. But nobody came. In the meantime, people were planting trees and were filling up the beautiful this. So I said, I'm going to plant a tree. I violated the laws of Yad Vashem. I said to the maintenance person, hey, I'm going to order a sign. I see Sousa Mendes, Portugal, and plant a tree, put it here, and keep quiet, don't tell anyone. So I got away with it.
I just wanted to going back to your first encounter with the Abbé. If you were telling us today that you were 4 or 5.
I was then 6 years old when I met the Abbé, when the Abbé helped us, yes.
And you were going to a Catholic school.
Well, I was in that village outside of Grenoble. I was 6 years old. I went to first grade. That was the Italian zone. And I went to, it was a village school, and the teachers were nuns. And they taught us to say the Catholic prayers and so forth. I didn't know I was Jewish because my parents didn't speak, they were refugees, but I didn't know. I remember that I never heard the word Jewish in that village. If somebody had told me Jewish, I would have said, what's that? Never heard of that. The first time I discovered that I was Jewish was when we were in Switzerland, and I was sent to a children's home, which was operated by the Jewish Federation in Switzerland. So they started teaching me the prayers and so forth. But in France, when I was still in France, I didn't know I was Jewish. In fact, at home, before I went to sleep, I said the Lord's Prayer. I said this and that. Yes, I didn't know anything else. That was,
This is the way the parents protected you. Your parents protected you.
Of course, because I would have talked about it. Je suis un juif. That was bad, So you have to keep secret because you never know. You never know.
Yes, and
Although the French. Very much.
Thank you. Great. I didn't think so. All right.